Hi there. Welcome to some Wendy Wisdom on a Monday today. I'm happy you're here with me. Drop me a hello in the comments so that I know that you're here. Today, we're going to talk about layoff proofing, your resume and your LinkedIn, and we're going to talk about how to make those layoff worries disappear. So, if you have questions about either of these topics, please drop them in the comments so I can make sure that I cover them as we talk today. So, for the last year, we've seen all sorts of big name companies lay off. The number is getting bigger by the month. And so if you are having some layoff nightmares going on in your life, or you've been impacted by layoffs, you are not alone. And we're here today to say, okay, so what do we do if we've been laid off? What do we do if we're worried about being laid off? There's some overlap to what those to-do lists look like. And taking that action is the number one thing that you can do to put those worries to rest. So, if you're watching me on LinkedIn, then go ahead and make sure that you find me and hit the message function so that if you want to interact with me during this workshop, you don't have to put it in the comments for everyone to see. You can, and I'm totally fine with that. But for those of you who'd like to actually interact with me during this workshop in a more private feature, go ahead and use the message feature. We do not have to be connected on LinkedIn for you to be able to message me because I have an account that's open to connections. So go ahead and do that. And if you are in my free Facebook group, or if you're on my Facebook profile, then obviously go ahead and DM me there. If you don't feel like asking the questions you want to ask, or responding to the questions I ask in a public setting. And those of you comfortable with that, go at it, give it to me. I'm ready for it. Okay. Just want you to make sure you have your preferred channel to talk with me. So, our next workshop that I'm doing outside of my regular weekly lives will be on March 1st about how to leverage LinkedIn to get your next job. And so if you're interested in that, drop me a workshop in a private DM or in the comments so that I know to make sure that you have the link for that. Today, let's get started with the basics. We're going to focus on updating and upgrading your resume and your LinkedIn profile. So basically, your resume and the LinkedIn experience section are twins. They're identical twins. There are people who disagree with me on that. And well, I'll just say that not only have I been coaching for 20 years, I have hired thousands of people in my career. I have actually been the boss of more than 1,000 people. I have conducted 12,000 interviews in my career. And I have taught dozens of hiring managers and early career recruiters how to build interview processes, how to conduct effective interviews, and in the case of the hiring managers and recruiters also, how to find the talent that they need on LinkedIn. So my take is you're going to have the same experience section on your resume and your LinkedIn. However, say you're like one of my clients who does channel sales leadership, and most of his career has been in the public sector, but he wouldn't mind moving into the private sector. Obviously, the way we talk about his career is going to be different when applying for a private sector job versus a public sector job. So keep that in mind, that yes, you might have different versions of your resume, but generally speaking, our resume and the experience section of your LinkedIn profile are definitely identical twins. Now, when we talk about the resume language and the experience section, we're really talking about results. What the people looking at your profile or your resume care about is, have you done the job we need done? Have you gotten the results that we need? That is their love language. People might talk to you about robots. I've set up so many application tracking software systems, and guess what? I've met and trained a lot of recruiters, and you know what? They're lovely human beings and they're not robots. And if you want to hear more on that subject, I am doing a quick training on that on Thursday at 2 o'clock Pacific. So you might want to check that out. It'll be on all my socials. So just understand that what we're talking about is talking about results. That's what we're talking about in the experience session in your resume. Now, if you hated English class in high school, I'm about to bring back some teenage trauma for you, and I'm so sorry, because we're going to use a little bit of grammar language just for a minute. We want to start our experience section bullets and our resume bullets with strong active verbs. We're not passive. Things don't happen to us in our jobs because we're trying to get hired to do something, not to have something happen to us. So that's why we want to use the strong active verbs. Now, for those of you who loved English class and hate math, now you're going to hate me too. Your goal, and this how hard this will be varies depending on what you do, is that about 80% of your bullets need to have measurable results on your resume and your LinkedIn profile. You want to show outcomes. Now, there are jobs and roles and functions where you do not have numbers. Sometimes it's just, well, I don't remember the numbers, or I'm not a number person, or I don't know nobody told me the numbers. Those kinds of things, that is a different story. We need to figure out what is as close to true as we possibly can imagine and get as close as possible and give the numbers. But what if there really are no numbers? Then we want really strong descriptive words. You want to paint a picture of, this is the result that I got, and I can bring this to your company, Ms. Hiring Manager, Mr. Recruiter. That's what you're trying to communicate. That's the purpose here. So if you check out my LinkedIn profile, and mine is set up not to get me hired for a job. Mine is set up to get me hired to do the things I do as a coach and a consultant. But I have left my work experience before I was an entrepreneur as is. And one of the reasons I do that is because some of my credibility and why you might want to hire me as a coach or a consultant is because of the things I did before as an employee. But another reason is I love to point people to my experience at a company called PayMap, and then we were acquired by Western Union. And so if you look at my Western Union and PayMap experience, you will see I led initiatives to recruit, hire, and train 72 CSRs in 70 days to meet aggressive call center operations, 3-month, 144% growth strategy. Here's another one. I improved customer service call center operation service levels by 88%. I launched new customer service operations in Tampa and met combined growth goals of 122%. That's what we're talking about. Now, those all start with I. Oftentimes in resumes, we don't actually start with a pronoun. We actually start with strong active verb. So if I were advising the person who had this job at PayMap in a job search, I would shake that up a little bit now. But what I love is strong active verbs here. We've got them launched, improved, led, and then we've got measurable results. And that's why anytime I talk on this subject, I always use my particular profile because it's a good example in that way, even though much of my profile is now set up for entrepreneur land and not for getting a job. So as you think about layoff proofing your resume and your LinkedIn profile, one of the first things you want to think about is, where am I going next? So do you know what your ideal next job is? Do you want to simply up level to the next title in your field? What are you looking for in your next boss, your next team? What size company do you want to work for? Because I spent 25 years in Silicon Valley am a Silicon Valley veteran as a tech startup exec and a consultant to tech startup execs. Obviously, a lot of the people I work with are in tech. Not all of them are in tech. But so if you are in tech, what tech? For example, I worked with someone a couple years ago who had only been in one kind of tech, and he was 32 years old. And we're like, okay, if you want to if you want to have any flexibility in the kind of tech you work in, now's the time. Let's get you out of the tech you've been doing into a different kind of tech, just to show some flexibility and broaden your skill set or people's perception of what you can do. So what we want to do is we want to find a few job postings that meet your criteria for your next job, whatever those criteria are. That will help inform what we're doing with our LinkedIn profile and our resume. And let's talk just a little bit about what if you're currently employed. So first of all, make sure that your privacy settings are set that LinkedIn doesn't notify people when you make changes on your profile. And then the second thing is really looking at how big a risk is it, and that someone that you work with is going to notice your profile changing, and how dramatically are you changing it? How much do you need to change it? And that will vary. I've worked with one person in 20 years whose boss used to check out his employees' profiles. One in 20 years. Now that was kind of a not super great move on his part. He also led marketing. And so there's that. If you are in marketing or sales, your profile is yours, but you're using LinkedIn probably to some degree as part of your role. And therefore, your flexibility to make changes is not as high as someone who does something else and nobody cares what his LinkedIn profile looks like. And you could have arguments until the end of the day about whether or not anyone's going to care, whether anyone has a right to care, anyone has a right to tell you what to do in your LinkedIn profile. We don't have time to go into all those arguments today. We'll let the people who like to argue online argue about that. All I'm going to say is my job as a career coach is to help you design a career that makes the money you want and allows you and creates space for the life you want to have. Whether that is music or running marathons or being a parent or being a good spouse or volunteering in your community, whatever the things are that are important to you outside of work, or maybe you have a side business, whatever that is, that's my job, is to help you with that. So in an environment like right now, if you're job hunting, we're all about getting you a bill-paying job. We know what you really want. We're going to go all in to get that, but we may take bill-paying as opposed to promotion to the next role, as long as we're strategic about how we're going to get you that promotion, because we're not giving up just because times are tough. If you are employed, our job is to keep you employed, assuming that you're not in a suck your soul dry job. So if you've got a job, you want to do the best you can with it. You want to keep it as long as you can. And you want to do everything you can without disrupting the job to be ready for a job search in case the bad news comes. Now, if the job is soul crushing, then we need to up that a little bit. If layoffs are looming and you've been through 3 rounds and survived, and you know you're not going to survive the next one, then we're going to do a little bit more. But if you have a stable job and you're just thinking about the next thing and you're just kind of worried because everybody else is, we want to not rock that boat, generally speaking, because you don't really want to join the ranks of the unemployed. So you want to assess your risk. You want to assess the reward for the next job and think about it from that perspective. Okay, so by looking at job postings, you get intel on the love language of the company. And I'm going to tell you about this, and then I'm going to tell you how I used to teach people how to do this and how I'm now doing it. And I will back up and say that as a coach, I work with a lot of people who are neurodivergent. So a lot of people who have ADD, a lot of people who have dyslexia, those particular groups, and a fair number of people who also are on the autism spectrum, what we used to call Asperger's. Okay, so just keep that in mind, and I'll explain why I talked about that in a minute. So it is a good idea for several reasons to pay attention to what the job postings for the roles that you want, how they talk about the work. So to some degree, we want to know, okay, I'm going for a mechanical engineering job, and my company called things this, but a lot of the job postings I'm seeing call something else. Okay, great. We want to pay attention to that. We also want to pay attention to the words they use to describe leadership. We want to pay attention to the words they use to describe different kinds of responsibilities and roles in a company. You want to be clear on that. But of course, you can't be all things to all people either. So you want to be clear on that, and you want to talk about what you've accomplished and what you can do, what you can bring to the table in language that will make the most sense to the most people on your LinkedIn profile. And you want your baseline resume to match that too. You want it to be, it really does make sense to most people. And that's what we want to do. So now, back in the day, I used to have people help my clients create a resume that was good language for the jobs they were going after. And that was what we put in the experience section on LinkedIn. And then what we would do is every time they applied, we'd identify keywords that were in that job posting. And we'd look at hard skills jobs, technical jobs, for in this case, in this sample, forecasting, prospecting, compliance, stakeholders, things like that. And we would make sure that we would take the client's actual experience, and then we would embed in it as many relevant words that we found in the profile. And we did this because it does give the person reading it a little bit more of a vibe of your fit. But really, it was time consuming. And for my neurodivergent people, it became a blocking event to getting enough applications done. And in the current environment, number of applications is huge. So we got to do it easier, even for the neurotypical folks, but certainly for the people, the ADHD people, the ADD people, the people who struggle with the writing, this was just not doable. And the tweak wasn't the value, the juice wasn't worth the squeeze. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that the resume we create is grounded in producing the results that, generally speaking, your ideal jobs, the recruiters that work for those companies and the hiring managers, the language you're using makes sense to them and demonstrates that you can do the job. And then the only customizing we do is we take the bullets that you have for each job, and maybe the bullets in your summary section, and maybe the bullets in your skills section, if you're in a highly technical function and have skills section in your resume. We just switch those orders so that we highlight for that job the things that appear to be most important to that company. And those are usually pretty clear in a job posting, just so they don't have to go looking for things. So for example, one of my clients recently, it was a job he had like 8 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, and it was really relevant to a job he was applying to. So he did have a summary section at the top with a couple bullets of key highlighted experiences, which are results. And we made sure that the thing that was so valuable from the job 10 years ago was up there, up at the top. We wanted it really easy for somebody to find that piece of experience, that result he got. But generally speaking, in your bullets for any job you've had, what I've found is that that you want to kind of think about where they fall in the list, and the middle is where things get a little squishy. So you can leave things in the middle that, yes, you accomplished in that job, but they are less exciting, less attractive to the hiring team. And you put things like it's an Oreo cookie, and the chocolate part of the Oreo cookie is where you put the stuff that's most valuable to that company based on their job posting. So, our resume. We don't do sexy resumes. I understand that they look pretty, but juice not worth squeeze again. Don't do it. Keep it simple. No text boxes. We do name, mobile, email, nothing cute, your LinkedIn profile at the top. I will also point out that we don't have a career objective. And here's a little insider tip. When you save your resume, don't save it resume. Put your name in it. Because if you send a recruiter your resume and the name of the document is resume, then that recruiter is going to have to do something with it. Now, if you're applying into an application tracking software, you might be cutting and pasting from your resume. But generally speaking, if you're sending somebody the document, please don't name it resume. Put your name on it. Obviously, in most cases, it's going directly into application tracking software, so they will be able to find it based on your name. But if you're ever sending a resume to somebody and it's not going directly into the application tracking software, which is not something to be afraid of, people, it's simply a CRM for recruiters. It's just a filing cabinet, and it allows them to do things efficiently and effectively. You do not need to be afraid of it. It is not taking over the world. There is no bot destroying your life. But if you are ever sending your resume as a document to a human, please, for the love of God, name it your name and resume. Because otherwise, you're making them do the work. And the whole idea here is to make it easy for them to see that you are a good fit. We don't do career objectives. We don't do career objectives anymore. That is like really old. And like, I've been on LinkedIn for 20 years. So if I tell you it's old, it's old. A summary is sometimes valuable, especially depending on diversity of background or your early career or your late career, or you have things you want to highlight that are disparate across your experience. Normally our degrees are at the end. We don't put references on demand. They already know they're allowed to ask you for references. You don't need to tell them that. You don't need to give them permission to ask you. Skills lists. So the people who need a skills list, you're a recent graduate, you're in a highly technical field. Examples of that obviously are engineering roles, but also things like marketing operations, certain kinds of project management. I have a client who works on finance teams leading very expensive tech projects. There are a ton of highly technical tools that person uses. Those are examples of people who need a skills list. We want those love language filled star bullets. Now, let's talk about inside scoop. Now, I'm going to talk much more about recruiters on Thursday at 2:00 Pacific, but there are really two kinds of recruiters. One works internally at a company. One works at something that we call agencies. We used to call them contingency recruiters. So if you know a recruiter at the company that you want to work for, and it's either a small company or it's a big company, and they actually hire the roles that you're interested in, ask them what they like in a resume if you have the kind of relationship where you can do that. Now, keep in mind that recruiters don't have time for cold messages from people in most cases. If they're recruiting for venture-backed tech startups where they're small, the company doesn't have a big brand, and so people aren't going to come to their careers page and look for things, and they cannot afford the cost of posting all their jobs, then those folks are probably a little bit more interactive. But if recruiters are at larger organizations, they do not have all the time in the world at all. So if you know the recruiter, you have a way to talk to them, obviously ask them what they like in a resume and apply that to that company. Recruiters are human beings. They have different preferences. Companies have different preferences. And then there are preferences based on roles or departments. So if you have inside scoop, that's great. Use it. If you don't, then you might want to go with Ms. 12,000 interviews. Okay. Now, remember that your LinkedIn profile has superpowers that go way beyond the power of a resume. It's more than a brand, although we're going to talk about that, because when you land your next job is the day that you're going to start your next job search. And you're going to think about what you want to do next. And I literally work with people after they land their job, and we keep working together. And we say, now, how am I going to perform? And what am I going to do to make my experience at this job make it easy for me to get my next job? And some of that is internal behavior at their company, and some of it's external, including their presence on LinkedIn. And if you do that from day one and you do it right, you won't raise any red flags. Okay. And LinkedIn, one of my favorite things to say about LinkedIn is it's able to open doors like a rich daddy. Raise your hand if you didn't have one. So what I mean by the rich daddy is the dude who calls up his golf buddy when you're about to graduate from college and says, my daughter is graduating from college. Can you give her a job? Rich daddy buddy says, sure. My nephew is graduating next year. Can you give him a job? And bam, their lives are set. Well, most of us don't have that. So LinkedIn is how we make that happen for ourselves. So you want a headshot and background photo that tells a story that's on brand for you. And what I mean by that for you is you want a profile shot that is appropriate to the kinds of roles you want. And then a background image. For most people, what I recommend is something that aligns with either their work or one of their main outside of work interests. An example is a mechanical engineer client of mine. She was about 50 years old and she runs triathlons. I guess running is part of the triathlon anyway. And can you tell I don't run triathlons? So we wanted an image of her crossing a finish line. Why? Well, because of a little thing called age discrimination. So as a 50-year-old woman who's a mechanical engineer, how do we break down that little piece of discrimination? Show her crossing the finish line, doing something that most of the people hiring her can't do. Easy peasy. Whatever that background image is, it can be something that is about who you are as a human. For me, for a long time, before I was an entrepreneur, I had a picture of the San Francisco Giants ballpark. Why did I have a picture of a ballpark? You might ask. Because part of my brand part of my likability factor is I have kept score at every baseball game I have attended since I was in 7th grade. What does that do? Well, I worked in a world where I was often the only woman at the table. And if the men at that table were sports fans of any sport, the fact that I kept score at baseball games, which meant I know way more about baseball than most people, was impressive and a likability factor. They could talk to me about what happened in the Super Bowl. And even if the 49ers or the Ravens or the Eagles, my 3 football teams, were not in it and I didn't watch it, I'd be able to have an intelligent conversation. So that's why I did that. Now, at the end of your about section, I always recommend that you end with, when I'm not doing whatever it is your job is, when I'm not leading marketing operations for fintech companies, I do. And my list is 3 things. And you can look at the bottom of my about section, because my about section is all about the services I offer, so it's not relevant as an example for you, except the last sentence. When I'm not working with my coaching clients, I am keeping score at baseball games. I'm singing classical choral soprano, or I'm hosting fabulous dinner salons. Now, if you follow me or are a friend of mine on Facebook, you know that because you see food pictures posted almost daily. So you know that good stuff comes out of my kitchen and I take really gorgeous pictures of it. But for people on LinkedIn, obviously that's not, well, it's not obvious, but I don't talk about it here. I talk about it on my about section because people hire people they like, whether that's appropriate or not. And you raise your likability factor by showing some outside of work interests. That's what we do. So the image in the background can be valuable there. The about section primary purpose is to tell a story about your why and a dash of who. This helps if you've transitioned in your career, if you have like an odd change that you need to explain. If you're in leadership, sharing your leadership approach is valuable. And the things that you are passionate about, demonstrating some passion. We want very short paragraphs because nobody has any time and they might be reading it on a small device. Now, I already dove in, kind of went off script and dove in and got into the whipped cream and cherries, but let's talk about the likability factors. So as we've been talking about, the background image and your about section are part of do cover the what you do about for fun. The about section is only just that last line, nowhere else. And then the background photo, we've talked about that. Now, what you do for good can also be a connection factor. This is your volunteer section. So mine talks about the fact that I was chair of the board of an AIDS clinic in San Francisco. I'm actually really proud of that story. It actually is a business story. So I joined that board right after I left, after PayMap's exit, right after I left Western Union in the fall of 2003. I joined this board and then was quickly made board chair. And then we had a massive federal funding slash that could have knocked us under. And I was able to basically run a complete reorg of the organization. And since I wasn't working, I worked full time on that, figured out what we needed on our team, how to consolidate our space so we had less of a spend, what was the most important thing we needed to do to bring in more dollars so we could continue to serve the people and keep alive the people whose lives we were saving. And I left about a year and a half later, and that organization, that clinic, stayed in business for about 15 years and saved thousands of lives. So I'm really, really proud of that. But that volunteering piece is just a way for people to connect with me as a human. I've also added since then my whole volunteer choral singing career, from University Chorale at Towson University all the way to Westminster here in Nashville, and the choir tours and the Grand Teton Music Festival and all of that. There are people who will find that interesting. If you coach Little League, if you work in a dog rescue, whatever it is, that's where you put that stuff. It's important. Do it. It also makes you likable, makes you hireable. And I understand that some people might feel like they shouldn't have to do that, but think about it. You spend a lot of time working with the people you work with. So there's the Immune Enhancement Project, IEP, from 2003 to 2005, where I was board president, and I managed to grab the logos before they did close. So I have those there. And we talked about different ways to talk about what you've done. This is the old way that I had this written on my LinkedIn profile about section. Then we've got skills. So You'll note that only the top 3 skills will show up without somebody having to click on something. So that means pretty much no one's going to see the stuff under that. And I actually just went and changed mine the other day because it wasn't aligned with the services I'm providing these days. But you do want the top 3 skills on your skills list to be the most valued by the people you want to hire you next, not the most valued in your current job, and not necessarily the ones that you have the most endorsements for. So I'll say that again. Your top 3 skills should be the ones most relevant to the job you're going to have next. They're not the ones most valuable to your current job, nor are they the ones that you have the most endorsements on. Another thing is that, and I haven't polled the gazillion recruiters I know, but I'm personally not a fan of the new feature where they link the skills to your jobs. The reason I'm not a fan is, to me, it clutters things. And oftentimes what I see from my clients is the skills that they're popping up there in your experience section are not really the ones we want to highlight. So in my opinion, and if a recruiter tells you they disagree, you're going to listen to them if and only if they hire people for what you want to do. But in my opinion, a lot of those words are watering down your impact and get in the way of showing what you got done. And so to me, it's kind of like a cheat if you don't want to bother writing the bullets the way I told you to write them. Just do the work and demonstrate that you've done the things and gotten the results, and you will have stronger, more powerful language than your typical skill word. So I'm going to die on that hill, just like the resume formats. If the recruiter telling you I'm wrong is hiring for the role that you want in the company you want to work for, or a company very similar to the company you want to work for, then listen. Otherwise, you might want to listen to somebody who's an OG. Okay, then we've got recommendations from former colleagues, bosses, or clients. So when I left that fintech startup, LinkedIn was just a baby. LinkedIn started in 2003. That's when I left that fintech startup. I don't have any testimonials from my old bosses. What I do have is peers, cross-functional peers, and people who worked for me. And one of those I love, and it's got like a typo in it, and I loved it so much I didn't ask the person to fix it. And she said, I will follow her anywhere to work for her again. That one of the best things somebody could say about a boss, right? So these will fall in the order that they come in. So like mine about my W-2 days are buried down under a ton of client testimonials, but I think it is a nice to have. However, I don't know any recruiters that have time for looking at that. So if you don't have tons of time, you don't have to put a ton of time into it. But I do feel like if you are at a point where you are the boss of a bunch of people and you do a lot of cross-functional work, if you can have some recommendations of demonstrating cross-functional strong relationships, and some recommendations from people who used to work for you, not people who currently work for you, then I think that's not a bad idea. But let's be honest, the only person that's actually going to get to that part of your LinkedIn profile will be somebody who's like really struggling to make up a decision about you. And then at least you've got some candy there for them. So at the bottom end, I've got a dude who's a fellow board member at the AIDS clinic. I've got a peer from one of my last W-2 job right after the fintech startup. Katrina worked for me at Paymap. Suzanne was up here in the IT org. at PayMap and talked about what she appreciated about me as the operations leader. If you're going to do testimonials, a mix of bosses, peers, and people who reported to you is best. So make the most of the top section of your profile. We didn't talk about the headline. If you want my cheat sheet on creating the job landing headline, drop a cheat sheet in, you can call it a LI cheat sheet in the comments, or send me a private message and I will get you that. It is always the last thing I work on with clients because it is like where it all comes together. And so when you've got everything done, that's when we make that magic happen. That headline is super powerful and you want to make the most of it. You want to use your about section to tie together all the different facets of your experience and tell people who you are. You want to make sure your experience bullets on your LinkedIn profile match your amazing resume bullets, not bullets. I don't know what a bullet is, with an active verb and end with measurable results, numbers, and strong descriptive words. Let's do this. Let's make this happen. Let's make those layoff nightmares go away. That's a wrap. So where do you find me? Okay, you find me on LinkedIn. I was the first Wendy Taylor. That's why there's no numbers. I was the second Wendy Taylor on Facebook. So that's why there's a number. I also do have, and that is not my LinkedIn Facebook community there, that link. I do have a free Facebook community called Career Design for Your Whole Life. You want to check that out. And if you would like to chat with me about how to make those layoff nightmares go away, or the unemployment line nightmares go away, or the I have a job and I know I should be grateful, but it is soul crushing, that one too. All those scenarios, go ahead and grab this on my LinkedIn profile. I do have one of those buttons that should link you to my calendar, but my calendar is at calendly.com. Wendy taking charge US /take-charge-of-your-career. Yes. Okay. So you know where to find me. DM me, drop me comments. I post on LinkedIn, Facebook, and my Facebook community on the regular. Send me some emoji love, drop me some comments. I can't wait to help you on this journey. And grab that cheat sheet about the all-important headline, the LinkedIn tagline on your profile. You're going to want that. Have an absolutely wonderful rest of your day and a fabulous week, and enjoy, if you're off today, the rest of your day off.